So I've kept my eye out for a deal on Control for the past few months.
Should have seen this coming.
It was released in August of 2019 to some outstanding reviews, but it was an unknown franchise to me, so I bought up Dishonored 2 and Prey, some more known quantities in my favorite action RPG genre, to keep my quarantine brain entertained. Finally, I saw it on the PlayStation Store for just $26, and I snapped it up for what I hoped would be some enthralling storytelling to distract from a weeks-long heatwave hanging over Toronto and, oh yeah, the virus that shut down North America. Luckily, Control turned out to be exactly the type of game that I love. Intriguing characters, engaging combat, and a setting that uses the video game medium to deliver a universe and a story with more depth than any movie.
Okay, that was a much better start than last time. And then I guessed where she was.
So, is Control a good game or a great one?
Much better.
While reports have stated that Control met the developer's sales expectations, this new franchise from well-regarded Alan Wake developer Remedy Entertainment didn't seem to smash any records. It appears we're more likely to discuss Control as a sort of overlooked gem than a game that sets some new standards for units sold or new gameplay mechanics. The critical consensus puts this game right on that edge, a 9 out of 10, and based on my playthrough, it's a well-deserved rating. Like I said, this is the type of game that I love. A single-player, science fiction, superpower action game. Throw in some RPG elements, and I'm pretty damn happy to put an hour or two a day into a game like this for a couple weeks. And of course, relay the evolving story to any person who dares ask me what I've been playing recently. With Control, I have a fortunate problem. The combat is exceptionally entertaining, though not especially original. On the narrative front, I found it intriguing, enjoyable but opaque, apparently on purpose. The game is packed full of visual style and storytelling creativity you won't find anywhere else. While the twisting narrative didn't detract from my enjoying the game, and it certainly pushed me towards the next mission objective, the lack of explanation and resolution left me holding the bag at the end of an otherwise outstanding video game. There are 2 expansions for Control, the Foundation and AWE, which will hopefully fill in the origins of the Federal Bureau of Control and provide some closure to the story. I feel obligated and excited to play both these and see what parts of the story might have been shielded from view. Control is beautiful in both its moment-to-moment visual style and its inventive setting. My PS4 Slim could be brought to its knees by the simultaneous light reflections and rock shattering and shifting levels. The ray tracing and particle effects might be sublime on a high-end PC, but on PlayStation, they could offer a peek of the next generation. I'm sure there are a dozen videos out there describing how the brutalist architecture of the Federal Bureau of Control's HQ, the oldest house, enhances the claustrophobia, intimidation, and magnitude of the mystery that you're attempting to unravel. I'll just add, I appreciate the effort that went into producing an environment that we haven't seen in many games. During pitch meetings, someone must have suggested a mid-rise office park with a standard glass wall and cubicle setup to further parody post-industrial knowledge workers. They zagged and added a whole layer of intimidating personality to the game. There's amazing use of color. Enemies appear in a puff of smoky liquid that floats in the air around them, and their deaths are accompanied by a similar burst of red dust. Your gameplay can be interrupted by an overlaid hallucination from the former director of the Bureau, the epitome of a smoking man archetype made famous by the X-Files and reminiscent of G-Man from Half-Life, but it's unique to be presented in this way. The color turquoise always leads to something interesting. Yellow and diseased white is the color theme of the underground mold battles. Black rock reflects light from mining sites. The portraits hung on the walls in the game use real photos of actors, and other parts of the game use real-world video. It's weird, and it adds to the surreal story being told by breaking the rules of modern AAA games and their emphasis on performance capture and lifelike rendering of actors in-engine. Whether Control is a good game or a great one ultimately comes down to whether you appreciate decisions like this. The style and the story mixed together to create something you haven't quite seen before, or at least recently, in a video game. And that depending on the player, may be what pushes it from a fun and enjoyable experience to something you might recall and discuss with other gamers years from now. The gameplay is fast and enjoyable, though I wouldn't call it revolutionary. The powers you acquire as the game goes on reminds me of the Jedi Knight series from PC gaming years past. Force push, mind control, energy shield, most of it is here, save for chucking a lightsaber like a boomerang. Speed is everything in combat for control. You're dodging incoming rocks and shooting approaching enemies and switching gun configurations and trying to maintain your shield. Health is only dropped when enemies are damaged, so you'll be darting around trying to collect those little blue dots while doing all of the above. It's frantic, and when you get through a particularly panic-inducing sequence, you feel a corresponding sense of relief. In the moment, it's pretty intense and involving, and gave me that replayable feeling that if I could just change up my powers and tactics slightly, it would be enough to get through the melee next time around. Most of the time, this turned out to be right. Along with your powers, your modular handgun is your best friend in combat. It can simulate a shotgun or a long-range rifle, but what I really appreciated was how it stays in its compact form so it doesn't stylistically overtake the game or dominate the screen. For gameplay purposes, it's a tool. Upgrading it isn't the reason why you're playing.
Did they get pulled in too?
Or they forced their way in.
The player character, Jesse Faden, is likable enough.
Who knows?
Compared to some of the more memorable protagonists in recent game history, she doesn't display the nobility of Horizon Zero Dawn's Aloy or the burned-out rage of Ellie from The Last of Us. As a player analog in this kind of story, Jesse has to approach the unknown with a certain amount of curiosity, levity, and courage.
Take a look for yourself.
In order for the player to have a fun time, she can't be cynical or legitimately terrified of the situation she incredulously finds herself in.
Real helpful, Arish.
I try.
Can you tell me what an object of power is exactly? This is all...
She's trapped in a modulating office building with interdimensional zombies and gaslighting coworkers, so at least her cautious approach is understandable. That's a tough line to walk for the writers and designers of this game. As the story unfolds and the mystery becomes predictably more and more personal for Jessie, she needs to help the player shrug it off and keep going. Shrug it off might as well be the motto of the FBC. Along with a managing team divided into each area, you meet a few of the on-the-ground workers who seem to be more realistic about the situation unfolding at the oldest house.
Good news is, it's right down the hall. Bad news is, a hiss monster has decided to move in, so that's great.
Monster.
That's what the Rangers said. The ones that survived, anyway.
You have to accept the fact that this whole building is changing shape. Accept the fact that you're chasing an elusive nerd from section to section. Accept that common household appliances can be sources of power and terror. There's a creepy, low-budget puppet show called The Threshold Kids that seems to teach dark lessons about the nature of interdimensional travel.
Why don't you tell Uncle Mr. Bones what's
You're not
wrong?
really handed an explanation for this apparently government-run organization and its limitless budget. It's weird, it's alienating, and it must have been a ton of fun to write the story and produce the FMV caliber videos that appear on projector screens throughout the oldest house.
You have to get me out of here. The door can only be opened by the Panopticon supervisor. That's Langston, if he's still around.
Langston. Yeah, I know him. I'll go ask him how to get you out.
Please hurry. My eyes, they can't.
While Jessie believes this might be the worst day of her life, the workers respond to this sort of thing as if it's a drill that happens every quarter. Their co-workers have been possessed, their workplace is, for lack of a better word, haunted, and they're unlikely to get that promotion that they wanted for the past 6 months. Why is everyone cool with this? The surreal mix of mundane and fantastic is core to the tone of the game. To me, it was a double-edged sword. While there were moments that delivered a hilarious understatement, there were other times that left me wondering why they decided to undercut the seriousness of their game that has elements of horror and unnerving sci-fi.
Okay, I've got Ati's cassette.
To push the story along, there are magnificent set pieces. The standout is undoubtedly the most surreal one, the ashtray maze, which has to be experienced to be appreciated. There's a killer soundtrack, unique visuals, and outstanding use of color. It's a technical and artistic achievement, and one that gave me that jolt of adrenaline that one can only get from experiencing a revelation in gaming. It was like playing Doom for the first time in the 90s. You just can't believe how much this kicks ass. I was lucky to have zero idea what was coming my way when I walked into the maze, and I won't spoil any of the visuals in case you intend to play it for yourself. The collectibles, mods, upgrades, and resources are all there, and in my experience, they're needed to help you get over the hump for some particularly difficult combat. Waves of enemies are shooting and flinging grenades and debris in your direction, so it helps to have an upgraded shotgun blast that can take out enemies in one hit rather than two. There are side quests and optional arenas to test your skills in. You'll need the skill points from the side quests, and the stories told within them are well worth your time. The fungus in the basement provides another interesting setting to battle in, while adding many horror elements, though I'm not sure how this arm of the oldest house fit with the mystery being unraveled in the rest of the game. The timed combat challenge arena, which was added in a post-launch update from what I understand, is located creatively inside of a jukebox, and the reward is a mere collection of random weapons mods. The board countermeasures are a task list encouraging the player to visit an area and kill a certain number or type of enemy. I mostly ignored these, which may have added somewhat to the challenge in combat. There's little to be conveyed narratively in either of these situations, and the rewards are relatively sparse. Completionists may become obsessed as the difficulty increases, but for the average player, they would only add bonus hours to your experience. Across platforms, gaming enthusiasts live in a time of plenty. There are an increasing number of loot shooters, battle royales, and never-ending open worlds to repetitively eat up one's time. On the single-player narrative side of the spectrum, the ambition to combine a satisfying narrative and rewarding gameplay has never been greater. Take recent PS4 examples like God of War, The Last of Us Part 2, and Ghost of Tsushima. And Control deserves to be mentioned alongside those outstanding titles. Control knows what it is when it comes to combat. It's quick, loud, and unforgiving, though the loot and mods leave something to be desired in terms of adding variety to the gameplay. I appreciate that there's no stealth mission, and puzzles are inventive and sometimes optional. Ultimately, the story achieves its goal insofar as it pushes the player forward. It definitely kept my sights on the next weird happening, setting Control apart from mediocre contemporaries that rely on historical settings, zombie apocalypses, and predictable revenge narratives. Control doesn't try to go bigger than Red Dead Redemption 2 or be more violent than Doom. It shows off the skills of the team at Remedy in terms of the smooth gameplay, inventive storytelling elements, and original setting. It challenges the player to make sense of the mystery that Jessie finds herself in. Control is better than good. It's more creatively and technically ambitious than any game made by a similar-sized company. At its best, it kicks so much ass that you can't wait to see what's around the next corner. When things slow down, for better or worse, you have time to think about the story. That leaves you, unfortunately, with more questions than answers.